So the government is at it again. From NBC News, FBI resumes outreach. Don't you love the language they use? FBI resumes outreach to social media companies over foreign propaganda. The agency put the briefings on pause amid lawsuits and government scrutiny. The FBI has resumed some of its efforts to share information with some American tech companies about foreign propagandists using their platforms after it ceased contact for more than half a year. The program, established during the Trump administration, briefed tech giants like Microsoft, Google, and Meta when the U.S. intelligence community found evidence of covert influence operations using their products to mislead Americans. It was put on hold this summer in the wake of a lawsuit that accused the U.S. government of improperly pressuring tech companies about how to moderate their sites, and an aggressive inquisition from the House Judiciary Committee and its chair, Jim Jordan. The lawsuit, which was filed by the Republican Attorneys General of Louisiana and Missouri, awaits a ruling from the Supreme Court. A majority of the justices appeared skeptical of the suit when they heard its claims. This, unfortunately, is true. I did a video on this a few days ago when they were having oral arguments, and statements made by a couple of the justices about the government pressuring, not outreach, but actually pressuring media outlets was very disturbing, because it was clear that they did not see a problem with that, having done it themselves apparently by their own admission. I'll put a link to that video in the description below if you'd like to take a look at it. The FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, responsible for conducting the briefings, resumed outreach a little more than 2 weeks ago, quote, in coordination with the Department of Justice, a government entity that we all can trust. The FBI recently implemented procedures to facilitate sharing information about foreign malign influence with social media companies in a way that reinforces the private companies are free to decide on their own whether and how to take action on that information. It's really their choice. It's Facebook's choice. It's Twitter's choice whether or not they should censor or shadow ban. Quite frankly, this assertion is BS, because we know from the release of the Twitter files, Matt Taibbi, and then also the Facebook files, which were posted by Jim Jordan. And there's plenty of evidence in there documented where there's pressure from the government, pressure from the Biden White House concerning, pressure from the government concerning the 2020 election, concerning the big cooties scam, also just pressuring the platforms to silence anybody who is challenging the government's approved narrative. So back to the story. And again, remember, this is NBC. The FBI's previous outreach to the tech companies similarly did not include any requirement that they act on the information, said people at 3 of the tech companies that previously received them. That's not true. If you look at the Twitter files, if you go back and look at the Twitter files and the Facebook files, there's clear evidence of email communications. It's in writing that shows that this statement is false. At a hearing last week, Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Mark Warner, Democrat, Virginia, alluded to the dates the FBI paused and resumed the program. All throughout the Trump administration, and in this case, the Trump administration did right, there was voluntary sharing that went back and forth on a regular basis. So if NSA or CISA found evidence of foreign malign influence, and again, who's making that decision? That it's malign? That could be shared on a voluntary basis with the companies and vice versa. If this was just about sharing information, there's no need to be concerned. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not what's happening, and we know that's not what's happening because we have evidence that has been disclosed to the public to the contrary. Another story from the Washington Times, again, trying to spin this as if it's a good thing. Partnerships with tech companies aim to help U.S. secure elections. The U.S. intelligence community is ramping up work with technology companies ahead of the November elections as cybersecurity professionals search for new ways to combat foreign threats to the American electoral system that appeared unthinkable 4 years ago. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Intelligence Agency had no communication on election interference issues with the social media platforms from July through at least mid-January, said, again, Senator Mark Warner of the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Mr. Warner blames the frozen relationships on cautious Biden administration attorneys. Now we've shaken up the lawyers enough, and that is starting, Mr. Warner said at the CrowdStrike Government Threat Summit. But I think, again, those channels of communication, and not only with the social media platforms, but frankly with the outside researchers, with private sector entities like you guys who are identifying this kind of misinformation and disinformation and election tactics. Who gets to decide what is misinformation and what is disinformation? Well, according to the U.S. Constitution, also known as the law of the land, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It doesn't say anything about the president, and it doesn't say anything about the Supreme Court. Why? Because they're not supposed to be creating rules in the first place. Congress passes the laws, the president executes the laws, Supreme Court interprets the law. But this language is very specific. It doesn't say Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, except in certain circumstances where there's suspicion of misinformation or disinformation or foreign malign influence. No, it says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press.